It didn't start with anger, it started with confusion. It's something felt off, but you couldn't quite name it. You replayed the words in your head, trying to make them fit, trying to make them true, because a part of you needed them to be true. And when reality finally broke through, it didn't just feel like a lie, it felt like betrayal. This is something almost everyone goes through at some point. You trust someone, you believe what they tell you, and then at some point you realize that what you were given wasn't real, not entirely. That realization hits harder than expected, and suddenly the pain feels deeper than the situation itself should justify. People often reach for heavy language to describe it, words like manipulation, gaslighting, even abuse. And yes, sometimes those labels are accurate. There are people in the world who deliberately deceive, but most of the time, the intensity of those words reflects something else, the depth of the emotional impact, not necessarily the objective reality. So the real question isn't just why you were lied to. The real question is, why did it hurt this much? The uncomfortable truth is that being lied to is not a rare event. In fact, it's constant. You are lied to in small ways and large ways, directly and indirectly, by individuals and by systems. Governments distort reality. Media reshapes narratives. Marketing sells illusions. Social environments reward appearances over truth. Even within families, things are said not because they are accurate, but because they are convenient, comforting, or socially expected. And yet, most of these lies don't hurt you. They don't leave a mark. So clearly, not all lies are equal. If lying itself were the source of pain, then every lie would wound you the same way. But that's not what happens. Some lies barely register. Others stay with you for years. You might assume that the difference comes down to trust, that the lies which hurt are simply the ones told by people you believed in. But even that explanation falls short. Think about it carefully. Someone close to you, someone who genuinely cares about you, may have said things that weren't entirely true, things meant to comfort you, to protect you, or to make you feel better about yourself. And yet, those moments didn't devastate you. You didn't walk away questioning everything. You didn't feel shattered. So it's not just about who said it. The real difference lies somewhere else, somewhere more personal. The lies that hurt are not just heard, they are accepted, they are absorbed, they become part of how you see yourself, how you see the relationship, how you see reality. And that only happens under one condition. You wanted the lie to be true. That is where the vulnerability exists. There are certain things you carry inside you, unspoken desires, quiet insecurities, unresolved questions about your own worth. You may not always be fully aware of them, but they shape how you interpret the world. And when someone says something that aligns perfectly with those inner desires, it doesn't feel like information. It feels like confirmation. It feels like relief. Maybe it's the idea that you're special, that you're different, that you've finally been seen in a way no one else has seen you before. Maybe it's the belief that this connection is unique, that it means something more, that it's not like everything that came before. Or maybe it's something simpler, something more fundamental, the feeling that you are enough exactly as you are. When those ideas are reflected back to you, they don't feel like lies. They feel like truth finally catching up with you. And that's why they go in so deep. Because in that moment, you're not evaluating, you're not questioning, you're not stepping back to analyze, you're accepting. You're opening the door and letting it in without resistance. Not because you're naive, but because it resonates with something you already wanted to believe. And once it's inside, it starts to shape your perception. You begin to build on top of it. You make decisions based on it. You invest emotionally based on it. You adjust your expectations, your behavior, your sense of direction. Without realizing it, you start organizing your internal world around something that was never stable to begin with. That's when the setup is complete. Because when the truth eventually surfaces, and it always does, it doesn't just challenge a statement, it collapses everything that was built on top of it. And the pain you feel in that moment isn't just about being deceived. It's about losing the version of reality you had constructed around that belief. It's about the gap between what you thought was real and what actually is. And the wider that gap, the deeper the fall. That's why some lies feel insignificant while others feel like they've changed you. It's not about the scale of the lie itself. It's about how deeply it connected to something inside you, something you were already carrying long before that moment ever happened. To really understand why this hits as hard as it does, you have to look at a specific psychological structure operating beneath the surface, something often referred to as your ego ideal. This is not who you are in objective terms, but who you want to feel that you are. It's the internal image you're quietly trying to live up to, the version of yourself that resolves your doubts, fills in your insecurities, and completes the story you tell about your own value. Everyone has one, whether they're aware of it or not. For some, it's the idea of being uniquely desirable. For others, it's being irreplaceable, deeply understood, or finally chosen. Sometimes it's about competence, intelligence, or moral superiority. Whatever form it takes, the ego ideal represents a psychological destination, a place where everything about you finally makes sense and feels enough. Now, here's where things become dangerous. When someone says something that directly affirms that ideal, it doesn't feel like flattery. It feels like recognition. It feels earned. It feels real. And because it feels real, you don't guard against it. You don't slow down to question it. You accept it as evidence that the version of yourself you've been hoping to become is already here. That emotional payoff is powerful. It creates attachment quickly, often without you realizing it. You start to associate that person with how they made you feel about yourself, not just how they treated you, but how they defined you. And once that link is established, your emotional state becomes partially dependent on their reinforcement. This is where control begins to shift. Because anyone who can reliably make you feel aligned with your ego ideal also has the ability to withdraw that feeling. And when they do, intentionally or not, the contrast is brutal. One moment you feel elevated, certain, complete. The next, you feel uncertain, exposed, even diminished. It's not just that something changed externally, it's that your internal sense of self has been destabilized. And that instability creates emotional volatility. You start chasing the feeling you had before, you replay conversations, you analyze small changes in tone or behavior, you try to recover that earlier certainty, not realizing that what you're actually trying to recover is a version of yourself that was never grounded in reality to begin with. When the truth finally becomes undeniable, when the inconsistency, the exaggeration, or the deception reveals itself, it doesn't just correct a misunderstanding. It forces you to confront the possibility that the way you saw yourself during that time was based on something false. That's where the real pain is. Because now it's not just about them, it's about you. It's about how easily you believed it. It's about how much you invested in it. And for many people, that realization is more uncomfortable than the lie itself. It introduces doubt, not just about the other person, but about your own judgment, your own perception, your own ability to see things clearly. This is why criticism can hurt in a similar way. When someone says something negative that aligns with a fear you already carry, it lands with force. Not because it's objectively true, but because it might be true, or because you're not entirely sure that it isn't. That uncertainty creates psychological friction. The same mechanism operates in reverse with positive statements. The more a statement aligns with what you want to believe about yourself, the more persuasive it becomes. And the more persuasive it becomes, the less you question it. So the lies that hurt the most are rarely harsh or critical. They are usually affirming. They tell you exactly what you've been waiting to hear. They give you access to a feeling you've been trying to reach for a long time. And because of that, you lower your defenses in the exact place where you're most exposed. This is not about blaming yourself. It's about understanding the mechanism, because once you see it clearly, something important changes. You begin to recognize that the intensity of your reaction wasn't random. It followed a structure. It followed a vulnerability. And that vulnerability, once identified, can be managed, not eliminated, but accounted for. That's the difference between being repeatedly pulled into the same dynamic and being able to step back, observe it, and choose differently next time. So, what do you actually do with this? You don't fix it by becoming cynical or by rejecting everything you want to hear. That's not strength, that's avoidance. And it doesn't solve the real problem. The real solution is much more precise. You have to become aware of the specific things you most want to believe about yourself, not to suppress them, but to recognize them. Because those desires, those internal pressure points, are exactly where your perception becomes biased. They're the places where you're most likely to accept something without proper evaluation. And once you know where those points are, you can slow down when they're activated. You can create space between what you feel and what you accept as true. That space is where your control is. Over time, the goal is to build a self concept that is grounded in accurate self knowledge rather than external validation. Because when you actually understand who you are, clearly, honestly, both praise and criticism start to lose their grip. They don't disappear, but they no longer dictate your emotional state. And that changes everything. You're no longer pulled up by what you want to hear or dragged down by what you fear might be true. You move more steadily, more deliberately, based on your own values and your own judgment. And from that position, you become much harder to manipulate. So if this experience hurt more than it should have, take that seriously, not as a failure, but as information. There's something in it that points directly to where you're most vulnerable.